Okay, today we're doing Pythagorean Theorem. That's how you say this, Pythagorean Theorem. It is a formula named after a scientist, Pythagoras. So, Pythagorean Theorem is going to be a formula that can only be used for right triangles. A right triangle has a right angle on it. That's what that symbol means. It's a right angle, a 90-degree angle, a square corner. When you have a right triangle, the sides on each of the right angles is called the leg. So that's a leg, that's a leg. These are the sides on each side of this right angle. The side across from the right angle is always the hypotenuse, and that's how you say that word, the hypotenuse. These are the legs, this is the hypotenuse, which is across from that right angle, okay? Pythagorean theorem says this: if you take the leg, the length of it, and square it, plus the length of the other leg and square it, it will equal the hypotenuse squared. In some books and on some standardized tests, you'll see it as a squared plus b squared equals c squared, where a and b represent the legs and c represents the hypotenuse. Okay, since Matthew C uses this formula, that's what I'll be using today. So let's look at 10D1 on how to use Pythagorean theorem. You have a right triangle. This symbol tells you here it's a 90-degree angle. So the sides on each side of your 90-degree angle are called the legs. So this side represents a leg, this side represents a leg. The hypotenuse is always across from your 90-degree angle. The problem's asking for what is the length of the hypotenuse. So you use Pythagorean theorem, leg squared plus leg squared equals hypotenuse squared. Take the length of one leg. It doesn't matter which order you put the legs in, so I'm just going to take 3, and at the end my units will be inches. 2 little hash marks as inches. So I'm just going to say 3 and then square it plus the length of the other leg, 4, and square it is equal to the hypotenuse squared. 3 squared, 9. 4 squared, 16 equals hypotenuse squared. 9 plus 16, 25. But we're not solving for h squared, we want h. So we have to get rid of that square. The opposite of squaring is the square root, because if I take the square root of that, you guys did at some point in the book, like you said, the square root of x squared is just x. So the square root and the squares, like they cancel each other out and leave you with just that. So we're wanting h, so you take the square root of h squared. Well, in algebra, whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other side to make it balance out. So the square root of h squared, square root and square cancel each other out because they're opposites of each other. The opposite of squaring is square root. And so that would be h. Square root of 25 is just 5. What does that 5 represent? It represents the length of the hypotenuse. So since it's a length, we need units. Is it feet, inches, centimeters, meters? In this case, it's inches. So it's really important to put your inches on there to say it represents 5 inches. Okay, going down to a word problem, 10C number 9. George likes to doodle on his math paper. He draws a right triangle. That's really important. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a right triangle. What does a right triangle look like? It has a 90-degree angle right there. The hypotenuse is always across from the right angle. The problem says with legs of 6 inches and 8 inches. It doesn't matter which one is 6, which one is 8. So I'm going to make this 8 inches and that is 6 inches. Then the problem asks for how long is the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse is always across from the 90-degree angle. The legs are on each side of it. So how do we solve for the hypotenuse? You use Pythagorean theorem. Pythagorean theorem says leg squared plus leg squared is equal to the hypotenuse squared. We know the legs of the triangle, so we put that in. So that would be 6 squared plus 8 squared equals h squared. 6 squared is 6 times 6, 36. 8 squared, 8 times 8, 64. Don't do 6 times 2. Don't do 8 times 2. That means 6 times 6. That means 8 times 8 equals 8 squared. Okay, 36 plus 64, 100. equals h squared. I'm not solving for h squared, I want h. So how do I get rid of the square? Use square root. Opposite of square is square root. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other side to make it balance. Square root of h squared is just h. That square root and that square cancel each other out because they're opposites of each other. And square root of 100 is 25. I'm sorry, nope. Square root of 100, 10. And then you need units to represent the length. In our problem, we were dealing with inches, so that 10 means 10 inches. All right, look at 10E number 1. Look at the givens. You still have a right triangle. Anytime you have a right triangle and you're trying to solve for one of the sides, you can always use Pythagorean theorem. So you can only use Pythagorean theorems for right triangles. It has to be a right triangle. It has to have a right angle. So here you're giving a leg. So that's another leg. But this 13 feet, the side across from the right angle is the hypotenuse. That is your h. We are looking for the other leg. So we need to make sure and put everything in the formula correctly. We know one leg, which is 5, so it'd be 5 squared. We don't know the other leg, leave that as L squared. We know the hypotenuse is 13, so that would be 13 squared. 5 squared, 25. Don't know that leg. 13 squared, pretty sure 169. Yep, 169. Okay, how do we solve for this? We go back to what we've been doing is solving for the unknown. Get letters all by itself and numbers to the other side, which means we want this to go away because we want numbers on the right. So if I want it to go away, how do I do that? Right now it's an implied positive. We don't write the positive sign. So it's an implied positive, which means we need to do the opposite of adding, and we need to subtract it away. If we subtract it from this side, we have to subtract it from the other side to make that seesaw balance. Over here, the positive 25, negative 25 is 0. Those cancel and go away. L squared equals, that would be 4, 4, 1, 144. But I want L, not L squared, the opposite of squaring, square root. If you square root one side, you have to square root the other side. Those cancel each other out and give you L. Square root of 144 is 12. Don't forget your units. That represents 12 what? 12 feet. Look at 10B number 2. Same thing, solving for a leg. Look at what you're solving for, okay? That way you put everything into your formula correctly. Use Pythagorean theorem because it's a right triangle. So we know one of the legs, 6 squared. We don't know the other leg, so leave it as L squared. And we know the hypotenuse. Hypotenuse is always across from the right angle, 10 squared. 6 squared, 6 times 6, 36. Don't know my leg. 10 squared, 10 times 10, 100. I need to solve for that, which means that needs to go away. I want my letters all by itself. So that needs to go away. No sign, implied positive, means I need to subtract it to get it to go away. Whatever you do to one side, you do it to the other side. Those cancel, leaves leg squared. 4, that'd be 64. So opposite of squaring, square root. Whatever you do to one side, do the other side. That equals L. Square root of 64 is 8. And then you need your units, feet, or you can use a little dash.